Power can shield you from consequences, but it cannot hide you from the truth. When billionaire Alexander Whitley cruelly mocked Sarah Mendoza's accent at the prestigious Regal Windsor Hotel's front desk, he had no idea that the woman before him held the key to his carefully constructed facade. Comment below with what you enjoyed most and share what themes you'd like us to explore in future stories. We create narratives based on your requests. She had spent years preparing for this moment, orchestrating her placement at the exact hotel where he always stayed during his New York visits. The weight of the small silver locket hidden beneath her crisp uniform pressed against her skin, a constant reminder of what he had stolen from her family. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she handed him his keycard, her rehearsed smile never reaching her eyes. In that moment of casual cruelty, as his lips curled in derision at her pronunciation, Sarah made her decision. Today would be the day Alexander Whitley would learn exactly who she was and what she had come to take back. Sarah maintained her professional smile until Alexander Whitley disappeared into the elevator, then exhaled slowly as the doors closed on his smirking face. Her cheeks burned with humiliation as she noticed the sidelong glances from guests who had witnessed his mockery. "Your English is actually quite good," said a woman approaching the desk, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension masquerading as kindness. "Don't let people like him get to you." Sarah nodded, swallowing the retort that bubbled up inside her. She'd graduated summa cum laude in international relations from Columbia. Her English wasn't quite good. It was excellent. The accent was the only thing she couldn't fully erase. "Thank you, ma'am. How may I assist you today?" When her shift ended at 4, Sarah retreated to the staff room and collapsed onto a chair, closing her eyes. The encounter with Whitley had drained her more than anticipated. She hadn't expected the visceral reaction to seeing him in person after all these years of preparation. "Rough day." Marcus, the concierge, placed a cup of coffee beside her. "Just the usual entitled guest," she replied, forcing lightness into her voice. "Whitley, right? He stays here every quarter, always requests the Wellington suite." Marcus lowered his voice. "Management gives him whatever he wants because he's on some investor shortlist for the hotel chain." Sarah nodded, filing away this information. Good to know. When Marcus left, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Mama, he's here." She switched to Spanish, her native tongue flowing more naturally. "It's finally time." "Sarah, mi hija." Her mother's voice crackled through the line, laden with concern. "Perhaps this is not the way. Revenge only perpetuates pain." "It's not revenge," Sarah insisted. "It's justice. For Papa, for our home, for everything he took." The line went silent for a moment before her mother sighed. "Be careful. Men like Whitley, they don't lose gracefully." After hanging up, Sarah touched the locket hidden beneath her uniform shirt. Inside was a small photograph of her family, standing proudly in front of their home in Argentina before Whitley Industries came, before the acquisitions, before her father's suspicious accident. She remembered the day clearly, being 8 years old, watching her father argue with the American businessman on their front porch, the same man who had visited their home several times before, who had once brought her a doll from New York. She remembered how his kind smile had transformed into something cold and hard when her father refused to sell. 2 weeks later, her father was dead. Their land was seized through dubious legal channels, and her mother was packing their meager belongings to flee to America. Sarah glanced at her watch. She had studied Whitley's habits meticulously. He would be leaving for dinner at 7, which gave her just enough time. Straightening her uniform, she headed back to the front desk, requested to switch stations with her colleague, and positioned herself directly in front of the elevator bank. When Alexander Whitley emerged at precisely 7, Sarah would be the first person he saw. And this time, she wouldn't be just another faceless employee to mock. This time, she would make sure he remembered her name. Alexander Whitley stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Wellington suite, gazing at the Manhattan skyline he had helped reshape with his buildings. At 58, he still maintained the trim physique of a man who commanded respect through physical presence as much as financial power. His salt and pepper hair was expertly cut to soften his sharp features, a calculated effort to appear more approachable in media appearances. The receptionist's face flickered in his mind again. Something about her eyes had unsettled him, a flash of recognition he couldn't place. Alexander dismissed the thought. He encountered hundreds of people weekly, faces blurred together. A knock at the door interrupted his contemplation. "Enter!" he called, not turning from the view. James Harrington stepped in, carrying a leather portfolio. At 45, James had served as Alexander's right-hand man for 15 years, handling everything from legitimate business negotiations to problems that required more discreet solutions. "The Takeda Group is wavering on the terms," James reported, placing documents on the glass desk. "Their lawyers found language in Section 12 they want revised." Alexander turned, irritation flashing across his face. "The Japanese always negotiate until the final hour. It's theatrical." He picked up the document. "Make the minor concessions we planned for. Nothing more. This deal closes by month's end. The Takeda partnership would be the cornerstone of Whitley Industries' expansion into Asia, the final piece in Alexander's decades-long strategy to build a truly global empire. More importantly, it would secure his legacy before he announced his planned succession. There's something else," James added, his tone shifting. "Peterson called. He mentioned Argentina specifically." Alexander stiffened. "What about it?" "He was cryptic. Said ghosts don't stay buried forever." Walking to the bar, Alexander poured 2 fingers of scotch. "Peterson's getting sentimental in his old age. The Argentina situation was resolved decades ago. Still, the timing with the Takeda deal is coincidental," Alexander finished firmly. "But have our security team review the protocols anyway." After James left, Alexander retrieved a small key from his wallet. He opened the room safe and removed a worn leather case. Inside lay documents related to the Argentina acquisition, and a single photograph he couldn't bring himself to destroy. In it, a younger Alexander stood beside a beautiful woman with dark eyes outside a modest home. Mountains visible in the background. Elena Mendoza had been extraordinary, passionate about her community, her family's land, her principles. Their affair had been brief but intense, ended by his ambition and her discovery of his true business intentions. Alexander returned the photograph to its hiding place. The Argentina project had been the foundation of his fortune, the first major acquisition that proved his ruthlessness to investors. The methods had been regrettable but necessary. His phone chimed with a message from his daughter Victoria. "Confirmed for dinner Thursday. Need to discuss Foundation Gala." Victoria, his only acknowledged child, ran the Whitley Foundation with the same efficiency she applied to everything. Their relationship was cordial but distant, built on mutual respect rather than affection. Alexander replied with brief confirmation, then returned to the window. From this height, the people below were merely dots moving through the grid of streets. This was how he preferred to view humanity, from a distance, patterns to be analyzed and directed, rather than individuals with messy emotions and inconvenient claims. The receptionist's face appeared in his mind again. This time, he recognized what had disturbed him about her eyes. They were remarkably like Elena's. Sarah unlocked the door to her small queen's apartment, immediately greeted by the gentle scent of cilantro and cumin. Her mother stood at the stove, stirring a pot of her famous locro stew. "You saw him today," Eleanor stated, rather than asked, her back still turned. "Yes." Sarah hung her uniform in the closet. "He hasn't changed much. Still cruel, still entitled." She paused. "He mocked my accent." Elena turned, her once beautiful face now lined with years of hard work and quiet suffering. "And this confirms your path?" Instead of answering, Sarah moved to her bedroom. The space was spartanly furnished, except for one wall covered with research, newspaper clippings, corporate filings, and photographs connected by red string. At the center was a yellowed news article with the headline, "Whitley Industries acquires agricultural land in Argentina for development." She added a note about the Wellington suite and Whitley's quarterly stays. Then she pulled down a file labeled, "Whitley Industries, Current Holdings," and began reviewing it at her small desk. Elena appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Dinner is ready. I'll be there in a minute, Mama." "What will this accomplish, Sarah?" Elena asked softly. "Will it bring your father back? Will it restore our home?" Sarah turned to her mother, determination hardening her features. "It will expose the truth. It will make him face what he did to us, to the entire village. His company poisoned the river, displaced 80 families, and when Papa organized resistance, she couldn't finish the sentence. Your father would not want this consuming you. My father would want justice, Sarah countered. Elena sighed. There is a difference between justice and vengeance, mihija. The line between them is thin. And once crossed. I know what I'm doing, Sarah insisted, turning back to her files. After her mother left, Sarah opened her laptop and reviewed the information she'd gathered during her 3 months working at the Regal Windsor. Whitley's habits were predictable. Breakfast at 7, business meetings until late afternoon, dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants. He travelled with minimal security, relying on his driver and occasionally James Harrington, his fixer. Sarah opened another folder containing information on Harrington, former military, hired by Whitley 15 years ago, known for resolving problems efficiently. He would be the primary obstacle. Next, she examined documents from the Argentina project. Most were public records showing the official story. Whitley, industries purchasing land for an eco-friendly agricultural development, bringing jobs and prosperity. But Sarah had other documents, obtained through years of persistent investigation. Internal memos discussing resistance management, water quality reports showing contamination, medical records of unusual cancer clusters, and most damning, a copy of the police report of her father's accident with witness statements that had mysteriously disappeared from official records. Sarah opened her father's worn journal, reading again his accounts of meetings with Alexander Whitley, who had initially approached the community with promises of partnership and prosperity. Her father had trusted the American businessman, even welcomed him into their home. The betrayal had been complete. The last entry, dated the day before her father's death, mentioned a discovery that would expose Whitley's true intentions. Whatever evidence her father had found died with him. Sarah closed the journal and pulled out a small notebook containing her own observations. Tomorrow, Whitley would follow his usual schedule. She would be ready, positioned at the concierge desk, rather than reception. The first move in her carefully orchestrated plan would be subtle but significant. From her bookshelf, she retrieved a book on corporate law, reviewing the sections on corporate liability and international jurisdiction. Her Columbia education hadn't been merely for cover. She needed to understand her enemy's world completely to dismantle it. "Sarah," her mother called again. "The food is getting cold." "Coming, Mama," she replied, closing the book and gathering her resolve for tomorrow's encounter. The Regal Windsor's concierge desk offered a strategic advantage Sarah had been anticipating for weeks. Unlike the reception counter, the curved mahogany station positioned her at eye level with guests, creating a sense of equality rather than subservience. When Alexander Whitley approached at precisely 7:30 the next morning, Sarah was waiting. "Good morning, Mr. Whitley," she greeted, her accent deliberately more pronounced than usual. "How may I assist you today?" Recognition flickered across his face. "You were at reception yesterday?" "Yes, sir. I rotate between positions." Sarah maintained direct eye contact. "I've been asked to personally handle your arrangements during your stay." Alexander studied her nameplate. Sarah Mendoza. He pronounced her surname with exaggerated difficulty. "I need restaurant recommendations for a business dinner tonight. Something impressive but not ostentatious." Sarah nodded. "I believe Oriel would suit your needs perfectly. Their private dining room overlooks the park, and the chef trained at El Bulli in Catalonia." She pulled out a glossy brochure. "Or perhaps you'd prefer something with Argentine influence. There's a wonderful place in Soho that sources authentic ingredients from Mendoza province." The deliberate mention of her namesake province caused Alexander to look at her more carefully. "You're from Argentina?" "Yes, sir. A small town in San Juan province, Villa Esperanza." The color drained slightly from Alexander's face. Villa Esperanza was the town his company had effectively destroyed 25 years ago. "Beautiful countryside," he said carefully. "I've done business there." "Yes, I know," Sarah replied, holding his gaze. "Whitley Industries had quite an impact on the region. I've followed your company's work extensively." Alexander's posture stiffened. "You seem knowledgeable for a hotel concierge." "I have a degree in international relations from Columbia," Sarah said, her professional smile unwavering, "with focus on corporate development in South America. Your acquisition strategies from the early days are actually featured in several case studies." Suspicion replaced surprise in Alexander's expression. "Is that so? Particularly the Villa Esperanza project?" Sarah continued, sliding the restaurant recommendations across the desk. I've made a preliminary reservation at Oriole for 7, but I can change it if you prefer the Argentine option. Oriole is fine, Alexander replied tersely. Have my car ready at 6:30. As he turned to leave, Sarah added, one more thing. Mr. Whitley, there's been significant press interest in the upcoming Takeda partnership announcement. Several financial journalists have inquired about your stay here. Would you like us to maintain your privacy protocol? Alexander paused. This information wasn't publicly available yet. Who specifically has inquired? Richard Peterson from the Financial Times, Sarah mentioned casually. He seemed particularly interested in connecting your current expansion with your early international ventures. Alexander's jaw tightened. Maintain absolute privacy. Direct all press inquiries to my office. He pulled out his phone. I need to make a call. As he walked away, Sarah watched him dial with urgent fingers. The mention of Peterson, his former partner in the Argentina venture, had hit its mark. She'd never spoken to the journalist, but her research indicated a falling out between the two, men years ago. Sarah's colleague leaned over. What did you say to Whitley? He looks like he's seen a ghost. Just offering exceptional service, Sarah replied, turning her attention to the next guest. Throughout the day, Sarah noticed Alexander watching her from across the lobby during her shifts. Twice, she spotted James Harrington studying her from a distance. Once taking her photograph discreetly with his phone, the investigation had begun, exactly as she'd planned. They would find her background impeccable. Legitimate education, clean employment history, proper visa status. What they wouldn't find were the connections she had carefully concealed. The paper trail linking her to Villa Esperanza deliberately obscured. By evening, when she handed Alexander his car keys and wished him an excellent dinner, the slight tremor in his hand confirmed her strategy was working. The great Alexander Whitley was rattled, and this was only the beginning. There's something off about her, Alexander said, pacing the suite while James Harrington reviewed files on his tablet. Run a deeper check. Education records, visa application, family connections. I already did, James replied, his expression troubled. On paper, she's pristine. Columbia University confirms her degree. Previous employers give glowing recommendations. No criminal record? Not even a parking ticket. Too perfect. Alexander muttered. Nobody's that clean. What about family? Mother is Elena Mendoza, naturalized citizen, works as a nurse in Queens. No father listed on any documents. They emigrated from Argentina 23 years ago. Alexander stopped pacing. 23 years? Yes. Right after your Villa Esperanza project. James looked up from his tablet. Sir, is there something specific I should know about this woman? Alexander resumed pacing. She mentioned Peterson. Said he was asking questions about me at the hotel. I checked with Peterson's office. He's been in London for 2 weeks, hasn't reached out to the Regal Windsor. So she lied. Alexander's jaw tightened. Find out why. After James left, Alexander poured himself a scotch and stared out at the city lights. The name Mendoza had instantly transported him back to that summer in Argentina. Elena Mendoza, with her fierce intelligence and captivating smile. Their relationship had been brief but intense, ending abruptly when she discovered the true purpose of his visits to Villa Esperanza. Alexander closed his eyes, remembering their last conversation. Elena's accusations of betrayal, of using her to gain information about which landowners might sell. She'd been right, of course. Business was business. He hadn't anticipated falling for her, nor had he expected the community's stubborn resistance led by Elena's brother-in-law, Miguel Fuentes. That night, Alexander drifted into restless sleep, filled with images of Villa Esperanza. In his dreams, he stood again on the dusty main street, as locals watched him with accusatory eyes. Elena turned away from him. Miguel Fuentes pointed a finger, shouting about evidence of contamination plans. Then came the scene his mind had replayed countless times, the news of Miguel's fatal accident. Elena's tear-streaked face as she screamed that he was responsible. Alexander awoke with a start, sweat beading on his forehead. He checked his phone. 3:17 a.m. A text from James displayed a passport photo of Sarah Mendoza from her employment file. Even in the clinical documentation, the resemblance to Eleanor was unmistakable. Suddenly uneasy, Alexander opened his safe and removed the photograph of himself and Eleanor. She would be in her 50s now, around the age of the nurse in Queens. But Sarah, Alexander calculated quickly. If Eleanor had been pregnant when she left Argentina, the thought struck him physically, like a blow to the chest. He dismissed it immediately. Impossible. He would have known. Eleanor would have told him, if only to demand support, unless she'd wanted nothing from him, unless she'd been too proud, too angry, too protective of her child. Alexander replaced the photograph and closed the safe, his hands unsteady. Whether Sarah was Eleanor's daughter or not, her presence at his regular hotel and her knowledge of his past couldn't be coincidental. The timing with the Takeda deal was too perfect. Someone had positioned her there specifically to unsettle him. His phone rang, displaying a number he hadn't seen in years. "Alex, it's Peterson." Alexander's grip tightened on the phone. "It's 4 in the morning. I just got a very interesting call from an investigative journalist," Peterson said, ignoring the complaint. "Asking about Villa Esperanza, about the contamination data we buried, about Miguel Fuentes." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. But they have documents, Alex. Internal memos. They're looking for comment before publishing." Alexander ended the call and immediately dialed James. "Sir?" James answered groggily. "Find everything on Sarah Mendoza, now, and get me everything we have on Miguel Fuentes' accident. Every file, every report, every witness statement. Sir, those records were sealed years ago. Unseal them," Alexander ordered, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. "Someone's digging up Villa Esperanza, and I need to know exactly what they're going to find." Sarah moved silently through Alexander's suite, her hotel uniform granting her perfect cover as she performed the turn-down service. The housekeeping manager had been reluctant to send her instead of the regular attendant, but Sarah had volunteered, citing Mr. Whitley's request for consistent staff during his stay. She had 20 minutes at most before Alexander returned from his business dinner. The suite was immaculate, with only a single glass on the bar counter indicating human presence. Sarah went through the practiced motions of turn-down service, checking the bathroom supplies while scanning for anything useful. Alexander's laptop sat closed on the desk, likely password protected and encrypted. His briefcase contained only standard business documents. Sarah worked methodically, making the bed with fresh linens while keeping an eye on the time. 15 minutes left. The hotel's safe was her primary target. Standard issue, embedded in the closet wall behind a landscape painting. Most guests used simplistic codes: birthdays, anniversaries, address numbers. Sarah had studied Alexander's biographical details extensively, compiling a list of possible combinations. She tried his birth date first, 0512 to 67. The safe remained locked. Next, she entered the founding year of Whitley Industries, 1999. Nothing. Sarah checked her watch. 12 minutes remaining. She input Victoria Whitley's birth date, 040392. The safe beeped softly and unlocked. Inside lay several items: a leather portfolio containing documents, a Patek Philippe watch, a small velvet jewelry box, and a worn leather case. Sarah photographed everything with her phone before examining the contents. The portfolio held standard travel documents. The jewelry box contained platinum cufflinks. The leather case, however, made Sarah's heart race. Inside were papers related to Villa Esperanza and a single photograph. Sarah's hands trembled as she recognized her mother, 25 years younger, standing beside Alexander outside her childhood home. Elena looked radiant, her expression open and loving as she gazed at Alexander. They looked like a genuine couple, not a businessman manipulating a local woman for information. Sarah photographed the documents quickly, focusing on anything mentioning Miguel Fuentes or water testing. Then she examined the photograph again, noticing something she'd missed. Her mother wore the same silver locket Sarah now carried, the one with the Mendoza family crest. The sound of voices in the hallway froze. Her in place. Sarah quickly returned everything to the safe exactly as she'd found it, spun the dial to reset it, and continued her housekeeping duties. The voices passed by. 8 minutes left. Sarah completed the turn-down service, placing chocolates on the pillows and bottled water on the nightstand. As she gathered her cart to leave, a final impulse struck her. From her pocket, she withdrew a small matchbook from El Gaucho, the most famous restaurant in Villa Esperanza. She placed it casually on the desk, as if Alexander had emptied his pockets there. The matchbook bore the restaurant's logo, a silhouette of the mountains that had defined her childhood landscape. the same mountains visible in the photograph of her mother and Alexander. Sarah exited the suite and nodded professionally to a passing guest. In the service elevator, she leaned against the wall, heart pounding. The photograph confirmed what her mother had only hinted at over the years. Eleanor and Alexander had been genuinely involved. Whatever his business motives, there had been real emotion there, which made his betrayal all the more complete. Back at the concierge desk, Sarah checked the reservation system. Alexander had a breakfast meeting scheduled in the hotel restaurant tomorrow at 8. She would ensure she was stationed nearby, watching for his reaction to finding the matchbook. Her phone vibrated with a text from a number identified only as J. Found Peterson. Meeting tomorrow 4 p.m. Bring documents. Sarah confirmed the meeting. The journalist had been difficult to track down, but was known for exposing corporate malfeasance. With Peterson's recent inquiries about the Takeda deal, the timing was perfect to present her evidence about Villa Esperanza. As her shift ended, Sarah spotted James Harrington entering the hotel, his expression grim. Their investigations were accelerating simultaneously. She needed to stay one step ahead. In her locker, Sarah touched the silver locket beneath her uniform. "Soon, Papa," she whispered. "Soon everyone will know what really happened to you." Alexander stared at the matchbook on his desk, his coffee growing cold beside it. El Gaucho, the restaurant where he'd first met Elena, where they'd spent evenings discussing literature and politics, while he secretly assessed the village's potential for acquisition. The matchbook hadn't been there when he left for dinner. Someone had been in his room, someone who knew about Villa Esperanza. His phone rang. "Sir," James said without preamble, "I found a connection. Sarah Mendoza is the niece of Miguel Fuentes." Alexander closed his eyes. Miguel's sister married a Mendoza. Correct. Elena Mendoza, now residing in Queens. Her husband was Carlos Mendoza, who died in Argentina shortly before she emigrated with their daughter. The timing aligned perfectly with Elena's disappearance from Villa Esperanza after Miguel's accident. Alexander had assumed she'd returned to her family in another province. He never imagined she'd fled to America, carrying her hatred of him across continents. "There's more," James continued. "Sarah Mendoza has been researching you extensively. Our security team found she's accessed public records about Whitley Industries dating back 25 years. She's requested documentation about the Villa Esperanza development specifically. Have her removed from the hotel staff immediately. Sir, if I may, that could escalate the situation. Better to keep her where we can monitor her movements." Alexander considered this, turning the matchbook over in his fingers. "Arrange a private meeting. In my suite. No records. No witnesses." "Are you certain that's wise?" "Just do it!" Alexander snapped, ending the call. 30 minutes later, he spotted Sarah at the concierge desk. Their eyes met across the lobby, and she offered a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Alexander approached, maintaining a businessman's composure. "Ms. Mendoza, I'd like to discuss some special arrangements for my stay. Could you come to my suite at noon?" "Of course, Mr. Whitley," she replied smoothly. "Would you like me to bring our premium services catalogue?" "That won't be necessary." At noon precisely, Sarah knocked on his door. Alexander opened it, noting she'd brought a hotel tablet despite his instructions. "Please come in," he said, gesturing to the sitting area. "Can I offer you anything?" "No, thank you." Sarah remained standing, maintaining professional distance. Alexander held up the matchbook. "I believe you left this in my suite last night." Sarah's expression remained neutral. "I don't understand." "I think you do." Alexander placed the matchbook on the coffee table between them. "Villa Esperanza, El Gaucho restaurant. You've gone to considerable lengths to place yourself in my path, Ms. Mendoza. I'd like to know why." "I'm simply doing my job, Mr. Whitley." "Your job doesn't include searching my safe or mentioning Peterson to provoke a reaction." Alexander's voice hardened. "Let's stop pretending. You're Elena's daughter." A flicker of emotion crossed Sarah's face. "You remember my mother?" "Vividly." Alexander gestured again to the chairs. "Please sit. If we're going to have this conversation, let's be civilized." Sarah perched on the edge of a chair, her posture rigid. "There's nothing civilized about what your company did to Villa Esperanza." "Business decisions are rarely personal," Alexander countered, sitting opposite her. "Development requires sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" Sarah's professional mask slipped, revealing raw anger. You call what happened to my Uncle Miguel a sacrifice? The contaminated water that caused cancer in 12 children. The families forced from land they'd held for generations. Alexander leaned forward. What exactly do you want, Ms. Mendoza? Money? Is this some elaborate extortion scheme? Sarah laughed bitterly. You think this is about money? You can't buy what you've already stolen, Mr. Whitley. Then what? The truth. Sarah's eyes, so like Eleanor's, burned with intensity. Public acknowledgement of what really happened in Villa Esperanza. Reparations to the families affected. Justice for my uncle. Alexander studied her. You have no proof of any wrongdoing, don't I? Sarah held his gaze. Your former partner Peterson seems concerned about what might come to light. The internal memos about containment strategies for the contamination you knew would happen. The police reports with missing witness statements about Miguel's accident. A knock at the door interrupted them. James entered without waiting for a response. Sir, there's an urgent matter requiring your attention. His eyes flicked to Sarah meaningfully. We'll continue this discussion later, Ms. Mendoza, Alexander said, rising. I suggest you consider carefully what actions you take next. Accusations without evidence are simply slander. Sarah stood, professional demeanor back in place. Of course, Mr. Whitley. I'm available any time to assist with your needs during your stay. As she walked past him to the door, she added quietly, My mother's name is Elena, but you already knew that, didn't you? James spread documents across the suite's dining table while Alexander paced nearby. Her story checks out, James said. Elena Mendoza is Miguel Fuentes' sister-in-law. Sarah was 7 when Miguel died. They left Argentina 2 weeks after the accident. What about Miguel's death? What really happened? James hesitated. The official report states he lost control of his truck on a mountain road, but he slid forward a document. I found this in our archived files, an internal memo from our security contractor at the time. Alexander read the highlighted section. Fuentes continues resistance efforts, now claiming evidence of pre-planned contamination. Recommend immediate containment of situation before evidence reaches authorities. This doesn't explicitly indicate foul play, Alexander said, pushing the paper away. There's more. James produced another document. 3 witness statements that were removed from the official police report. All described a second vehicle forcing Miguel's truck off the road. All 3 witnesses later recanted. Alexander sat heavily. I never ordered anyone's death. Perhaps not explicitly, James said carefully, but our security contractor at that time was Victor Reynolds' firm. He was known for interpreting instructions broadly. Victor. Alexander's expression darkened. He handled all the local opposition. I gave him parameters but never specifics. Plausible deniability. Sir, if Sarah Mendoza has these documents, find out what she knows. And find Victor. He's still on the Whitley Industries board. We need to control this situation. Across town, Sarah sat in a quiet corner of a bustling coffee shop, watching the door. At precisely 4, a man in a rumpled suit entered, scanning the room before spotting her. John Bennett, investigative journalist for the Global Financial Review, had built his reputation exposing corporate malfeasance. Ms. Mendoza, he slid into the seat across from her. You said you have information about Whitley Industries. Sarah placed a flash drive on the table. Everything I've gathered over 7 years. Internal memos, contamination reports, witness, statements about my uncle's death that mysteriously disappeared from police records. Bennett picked up the drive. Why come forward now? The Takeda deal. Once it's finalized, Whitley expands into Asia, doubling his influence and wealth. He needs to face consequences before that happens. And your connection to this is personal. Sarah touched the locket at her throat. My uncle died exposing Whitley's plans. My village was destroyed. This isn't revenge, Mr. Bennett. It's justice. Bennett studied her. Alexander Whitley is powerful. He'll deny everything, claim the documents are forged. We need irrefutable proof. Like a confession? Sarah asked. I'm working on that. Be careful. People who cross Whitley tend to suffer unfortunate accidents. Bennett pocketed the drive. I'll review everything and let you know what we can use. Meanwhile, keep gathering evidence. After Bennett left, Sarah checked her phone. A message from her mother. Victor Reynolds called here asking about you. Be careful. Sarah's blood ran cold. Victor Reynolds, Alexander's enforcer during the villa Esperanza operation. Her research suggested he had orchestrated her uncle's accident on Alexander's behalf. If he was looking for her now, she dialed her mother immediately. "Mama, what exactly did Reynolds say?" "He claimed to be conducting a background check for a job application," Elena replied. "But his questions were about our time in Argentina, about Miguel." "Listen carefully," Sarah said urgently. "Pack a bag. Go stay with Tia Lucia in New Jersey. Don't tell anyone where you're going." "Sarah, what have you done?" "What needs to be done, Mama. Please, just go to Lucia's. I'll call you tomorrow." As Sarah ended the call, she noticed a man watching her from across the coffee shop. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away, but not before she recognized him as the driver who had brought Alexander to the hotel yesterday. They were following her now. The game had escalated. Sarah gathered her belongings and exited through the kitchen, a route she had scouted earlier. On the street, she hailed a taxi rather than taking her usual subway route home. "Change of plans," she texted Bennett. "Need to meet again. Tomorrow." His reply came quickly. "Agreed. Found something significant in your files. New location. Will. Send details." Sarah leaned back in the taxi, mind racing. If Reynolds was involved, the stakes had just risen dramatically. She hadn't anticipated Alexander mobilizing his resources so quickly. She needed to accelerate her plan before they silenced her, just as they had silenced her uncle 25 years ago. Villa Esperanza, Argentina, 1919. Elena Mendoza watched from her porch as the American businessman charmed her neighbors. Alexander Whitley moved through the village square with practiced ease, shaking hands and speaking surprisingly decent Spanish. His promise of turning their struggling agricultural community into a model of sustainable development had most villagers cautiously optimistic. "I don't trust him," Miguel Fuentes said, joining Elena on the porch. Her brother-in-law's weathered face was creased with concern. "Corporate men like that don't come to places like Villa Esperanza out of kindness." "Perhaps not," Elena agreed, "but we need the investment. The drought has lasted 3 years. People are leaving for the cities." Miguel shook his head. "Our families have worked this land for generations. We cannot sell our heritage for promises." Later that evening, Alexander joined Elena for dinner at El Gaucho. Over wine and grilled meats, they discussed literature, politics, and eventually, his development plans. "Your brother-in-law seems resistant," Alexander noted casually. "Miguel is protective of our community," Elena replied. "His family's land borders the river. They depend on clean water for their organic crops." Alexander leaned forward. "I understand his concerns, but my engineers have designed a processing facility with minimal environmental impact. The jobs created will transform Villa Esperanza." His passion seemed genuine, his blue eyes intense in the candlelight. Elena found herself drawn to him despite her reservations. Over the following weeks, as Alexander extended his stay, their relationship deepened. By day, he met with village officials and landowners. By night, he shared Elena's bed, whispering promises of a future where Villa Esperanza thrived with Whitley Industries investment. Elena, widowed young and raising her daughter Sarah alone, allowed herself to imagine a new life, until Miguel showed her the real plans. "Look at these," Miguel said, spreading technical documents across her kitchen table, while 7-year-old Sarah played outside. "These aren't the environmental impact studies Whitley showed the village council. These are the actual engineering plans." Elena scanned the documents, her heart sinking. The water usage projections were 10 times what Alexander had claimed. Waste disposal methods would contaminate the river within years. Most disturbing were notations about acceptable displacement of residents whose land would be needed for expansion. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice hollow. "From an engineer with a conscience," Miguel replied. "Elena, they're going to destroy our home, poison our water, and those jobs he promised, most require technical skills none of us have." That night, when Alexander came to her, Elena confronted him with what she'd learned. His expression shifted, from denial to cold calculation. "Business requires difficult decisions," he said finally. "The development will proceed. The economic benefits outweigh the costs." "You used me," Elena whispered. "You asked about Miguel, about which families might sell. You were gathering intelligence." Alexander didn't deny it. "I care for you, Elena. That wasn't pretense. Come to New York with me. Bring Sarah. You'll have a better life, while my community suffers? While my brother fights to save his land? Elena backed away from him. Get out of my house. Get out of Villa Esperanza. 2 weeks later, Miguel died when his truck plunged off a mountain road. He had been on his way to the provincial capital with evidence of Whitley Industries' environmental violations. The documents disappeared from the wreckage. Within months, Whitley Industries acquired the land through a web of local subsidiaries. Families who resisted found their water access mysteriously cut off, their crops failing, their livestock dying. One by one, they sold and left. Elena held out until men came to her home late one night, warning that accidents happen to stubborn people. The next day, she took Sarah and what little they could carry, fleeing first to Buenos Aires, then to America. Behind them, bulldozers tore into the earth of Villa Esperanza. The processing facility rose quickly. The river turned cloudy, then brown. The promised prosperity never materialized. And in New York, Alexander Whitley's fortune grew, built on a foundation of stolen land and broken promises. Sarah stood in Alexander's suite, evening light casting long shadows across the room. She had arranged this meeting on her terms during her off hours, no longer in her hotel uniform, but dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority. Thank you for agreeing to meet, she said, as Alexander closed the door. Your message suggested you wanted to resolve our situation. Alexander gestured to the sitting area. I'm willing to listen to reasonable terms. Sarah remained standing. I've given the documents to a journalist, John Bennett from Global Financial Review. Alexander's expression hardened. That's unfortunate. The story runs next week, unless I stop it. And what would prevent you from doing that? Alexander moved to the bar, pouring himself a scotch without offering Sarah anything. Money? Is that what this has been about all along? It's never been about money. Everyone has a price, Ms. Mendoza. Alexander sipped his drink. Name yours. Sarah approached slowly, placing a file on the coffee table. These are copies of internal memos regarding the Villa Esperanza project, specifically the environmental impact assessments that were concealed from the village. And this, she added, laying down another document, is a statement from Victor Frois, Reynolds' assistant, confirming that Reynolds was instructed to handle my uncle Miguel after he obtained these same documents. Alexander glanced at the papers without touching them. Easily fabricated. The originals have been authenticated by forensic document experts. Mr. Bennett has been thorough. Alexander studied her, calculation replacing anger. What do you want? A full public acknowledgement of what Whitley Industries did to Villa Esperanza. A substantial reparation fund for the displaced families and those suffering health effects from the contamination. And a formal investigation into my uncle's death. You're asking me to destroy everything I've built. I'm asking you to take responsibility for how you built it. Alexander set down his glass and picked up the Reynolds document, scanning it quickly. Victor acted independently. I never authorized any violence. You gave him the objective and looked the other way on methods, Sarah countered. That makes you equally responsible. Alexander was silent for a long moment. The Takeda deal closes next week. It's worth billions. I can offer you 50 million in exchange for your silence and all copies of these documents. Sarah laughed softly. Still trying to buy your way out. 100 million then. A fortune by any standard. You and your mother would never want for anything again. My mother lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens because everything was taken from her. She works double shifts as a nurse at 62 because her community and support system were destroyed. Sarah's voice remained steady despite her rising anger. She still wakes from nightmares about men coming to our home. You think money fixes that? Alexander moved closer. I regret what happened to your family. Truly. But business decisions have consequences that extend beyond the boardroom. I understood that cost and accepted it. Did you accept it for your daughter too? Alexander stiffened. Leave Victoria out of this. Why? Because she's innocent? So was I. Sarah held his gaze. I was 7 when my uncle was murdered. 7 when I had to leave my home, my friends, my language. 7 when I watched my mother weep as she burned photos of you, because she couldn't bear to see your face. Alexander turned away, moving to the window. If I agree to your terms, the damage to Whitley Industries would be catastrophic. Thousands of employees would suffer. Is that your justice? Justice isn't comfortable, Mr. Whitley. Neither is accountability. He faced her again. There may be another solution, one that addresses your concerns without destroying everything. I'm listening. The Whitley Foundation controls 30% of my personal wealth. I could restructure it, direct substantial resources toward environmental remediation in Villa Esperanza and support for displaced families. He paused. As for Miguel's death, I will cooperate with any investigation, provide all company records. Sarah considered this. Partial measures aren't enough. They're a starting point for negotiation. Alexander's tone softened slightly. Come to my office tomorrow. Meet with my foundation directors and lawyers. We'll draft something binding. Sarah hesitated. His sudden willingness to negotiate seemed suspicious. One more thing, she said. Call off Victor Reynolds. I know he's been looking for me, asking about my mother. Alexander's expression revealed genuine surprise. I haven't spoken to Victor about this. If he's investigating you, it's not on my orders. The implication hung in the air between them. If Reynolds was acting independently, the danger was greater than Sarah had calculated. Tomorrow, then, she said finally. Your office at 10. You can't seriously be considering her demands, James said, pacing Alexander's suite after Sarah had left. This could destroy everything we've built. Alexander stared at the documents Sarah had left behind. These are authentic. The letterhead, signatures, even the paper stock from that era. If Bennett publishes this, the Takeda deal collapses immediately. Multiple criminal investigations would follow. So we discredit her, plant evidence of mental instability, financial troubles, a vendetta against you. She's anticipated that. Alexander gestured to the papers. Bennett has already authenticated everything. A smear campaign would only validate her claims. James sat heavily. What about Reynolds? If he's investigating her independently, that concerns me more than her threats. Alexander rubbed his temples. Victor has the most to lose if Villa Esperanza resurfaces. He personally handled the problems there. You think he'd silence her? I think Victor protects Victor by any means necessary. Alexander reached for his phone. We need to contain him before he makes this worse. James watched Alexander dial, then added quietly, there's something else you should know. I've been looking deeper into Miguel Fuentes' accident. He slid a folder across the table. Based on the forensic reports and witness statements that were suppressed, it wasn't just intimidation gone wrong. It appears deliberate, premeditated. Alexander opened the folder, color draining from his face as he examined autopsy photos. The brake lines were cut, James continued. And according to this witness statement, Miguel had called Elena the morning of the accident, saying he had proof of discussions between Whitley Industries and local officials about bribes and environmental regulation exemptions. Alexander set down the folder. I never authorized this. I told Victor to handle the opposition, but not like this. Never like this. Victor went beyond your instructions, James acknowledged. But legally speaking, I'm still responsible. Alexander ended his call attempt, staring at the phone. Victor isn't answering. That's not a good sign. What will you do about Sarah Mendoza? Alexander was silent for a long moment. Her mother, Elena, we were involved briefly. More than a business arrangement. James nodded. I suspected as much from the timeline. Sarah would have been born approximately 9 months after I left Villa Esperanza. Alexander looked up. Is there any possibility that she's your daughter? James finished. I considered that. Her age matches, and there's a certain resemblance around the eyes. I need to know for certain. I can arrange a DNA test discreetly, but it would require her cooperation, or obtaining a sample without her knowledge. Alexander stood. Decision made. First, we need to ensure her safety. If Victor is moving against her, we need to intervene. Then we address her allegations, find a solution that provides justice without destroying the company. And if she is your daughter? Alexander moved to the window, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness. Then I have more to atone for than I realized. Across town, Sarah paced her apartment, phone pressed to her ear. Bennett isn't answering, she told her mother. His assistant says he's unreachable. This is becoming too dangerous, Elena replied, voice tight with worry. These men, they destroyed our home, killed Miguel. They won't hesitate to hurt you. I'm being careful, Sarah assured her. How are things at Tia Lucia's? Safe for now. Sarah, please, walk away from this. Your father wouldn't want you to risk your life. Papa raised me to stand up for what's right, Sarah countered. I'm seeing this through. After ending the call, Sarah checked the security measures she'd implemented. New locks, a chair wedged under the doorknob, windows secured. Still, unease prickled along her spine. Her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Bennett compromised. Reynolds involved. Don't go to Whitley office tomorrow. Meet at public location instead. James. Sarah stared at the message. It could be legitimate, or a trap. She needed more information. She dialed the hotel, asking for James Harrington's room. Mr. Harrington checked out an hour ago. The receptionist informed her. Sarah ended the call. Mind racing. If James had left the hotel, who sent the text? And what did it mean that Bennett was compromised? Her laptop chimed with an email notification from Bennett containing only a video file. Sarah clicked play with trembling fingers. The journalist appeared on screen, looking disheveled. Ms. Mendoza, I'm sending this as insurance. Men claiming to be federal agents confiscated my research today. They knew details only someone with access to my office could know. I've uploaded copies of your documents to secure servers that will release to major news outlets if I don't enter a password every 24 hours. Trust no one. I'm going to a safe location. The video ended abruptly. Sarah closed her laptop, heart pounding. Reynolds was moving faster than anticipated, neutralizing Bennett to prevent publication. Another text arrived. We need to talk. Not safe at my office or your apartment. Central Park, Bethesda Fountain, 8 a.m. Come alone, Alexander. Sarah considered her options. Meeting Alexander in public seemed safer than his office, but still risky. Yet with Bennett compromised and Reynolds closing in, Alexander might be her best chance of exposing the truth before. She was silenced too. She typed a reply. I'll be there. Dawn mist shrouded Bethesda Fountain as Sarah approached cautiously, scanning for any sign of a trap. Alexander sat alone on a bench, looking older in the harsh morning light. No James, no security detail visible. You came, he said, standing, as she approached. You said Bennett is compromised. Victor's doing. Alexander gestured for her to sit. He accessed Bennett's office last night, took everything related to Villa Esperanza. Why are you telling me this? Sarah remained standing, maintaining distance. Because Victor has gone rogue. He sees you as a threat to everything he's built alongside me. Alexander ran a hand through his silver hair. I've been reviewing the EA documents you provided. The evidence of what happened to your uncle is irrefutable. Sarah studied his face, searching for deception. You're admitting responsibility. I'm acknowledging that terrible things happened under my company's direction. Things I implicitly authorized but never fully understood. He met her gaze directly. I want to make it right, but Victor will do anything to prevent that. Why should I trust you now? Because Victor is targeting both of us, my security team. Discovered surveillance on my suite, unauthorized. He's monitoring my calls, my movements. Alexander lowered his voice. And he sent men to your mother's sister's home in New Jersey. Sarah's blood ran cold. How do you know where my mother is? The same way Victor does. Standard corporate intelligence gathering. Alexander checked his watch. They haven't moved against her yet, but we need to relocate her immediately. We? Sarah laughed bitterly. Now you care about my mother's safety. Elena and I. Alexander hesitated. It was complicated, but I never wished her harm. Sarah's phone vibrated. A text from her aunt. Strange men watching the house. Your mother is frightened. Alexander noted her expression. Victor's men. Sarah nodded reluctantly. I have a private jet at Teterboro, Alexander said. We can have your mother there in an hour. Fly her anywhere she'd be safe. And go where? Victor has resources globally, somewhere he wouldn't expect. Alexander leaned forward. Villa Esperanza. Sarah stared at him. You can't be serious. Victor would never anticipate us returning there. And the evidence we need to prove his direct involvement in Miguel's death might still exist in local records. Alexander stood. We find that evidence, we can stop Victor legally while addressing the broader injustices of the development project. My mother would never return there. Too many painful memories. Ask her, Alexander suggested. She might surprise you. Sarah stepped away to call Elena, explaining the situation in rapid Spanish. To her shock, her mother's response was immediate. I will go. There are people there who remember the truth. 3 hours later, Sarah found herself on Alexander's private jet beside her mother, watching Alexander work intently on his laptop across the aisle. The unreality of the situation struck her, flying to Argentina with the man she'd spent years planning to destroy. Now their fates unexpectedly aligned. Elena had said little since boarding, her expression unreadable as she occasionally glanced at Alexander. 25 years had passed since they'd last seen each other, yet the tension between them remained palpable. "I've arranged for local security I trust personally," Alexander said, breaking the silence. "Not corporate, but former military colleagues of James. They'll meet us in San Juan." "What exactly do you hope to find in Villa Esperanza?" Sarah asked. The provincial notary maintained records Victor thought were destroyed. Statements about Miguel's accident, documentation of the original land ownership before our acquisitions. Alexander closed his laptop. "With those, we can prove Victor's direct involvement in Miguel's death and the illegal tactics used to acquire the land." "And then what?" Elena spoke for the first time, her accent thicker with emotion. "You think papers will resurrect the dead? Restore a community destroyed?" Alexander met her gaze. "No, nothing can undo what happened, but we can acknowledge the truth, provide restitution, create something meaningful from the wreckage." Elena held his gaze. 25 years too late. "Yes," Alexander admitted quietly. "Too late for many things." The remainder of the flight passed in tense silence. Landing in San Juan, they transferred to an SUV with tinted windows, driving through increasingly rural landscapes toward Villa Esperanza. As mountains rose in the distance, Elena pressed her hand against the window, tears welling in her eyes. "It still looks the same," she whispered. The village itself had changed dramatically. Where once stood a vibrant community, now a small, struggling town remained, dominated by the aging Whitley Industries processing facility on its outskirts. The facility appeared operational but diminished, clearly employing far fewer people than originally promised. As they drove slowly down the main street, elderly residents turned to stare at the unfamiliar vehicle. Outside what had once been the village square, Alexander instructed the driver to stop. "We should speak to the provincial secretary first," he said. "His office maintains the historical records." Eleanor opened her door. "No, first I need to see my home." Without waiting for a response, she stepped out into the dust of the place she had fled a quarter-century before, her daughter and former lover following silently in her wake. The Mendoza family home still stood, though barely. Its once vibrant blue walls had faded to a ghostly grey. The garden Eleanor had lovingly tended now a tangle of weeds. She approached slowly, each step weighted with memory. "They said someone bought it after we left," she murmured. "But no one ever lived here." Alexander remained at a respectful distance, while Sarah followed her mother onto the sagging porch. The door hung askew on rusted hinges, requiring only a gentle push to open. Inside, dust covered the few remaining pieces of furniture, sunlight slanting through broken windows. "This was my childhood," Sarah said, trailing her fingers across a decaying wooden table. "I remembered it differently. Memory softens harsh edges," Eleanor replied. "Our home was humble, but filled with love." She turned to Alexander, who stood uncertainly in the doorway. "You were welcomed here once." Before he could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching drew their attention. Through the grimy window, they saw 3 black SUVs stopping outside, disgorging men in suits. "That's not my security team," Alexander said sharply. "They weren't due for hours." "Victor," Sarah guessed, reaching instinctively for her mother's hand. Alexander moved quickly. "There's a back door, yes? Through the kitchen?" Elena nodded. "It leads to the orchard, or what was once the orchard." "Go now," Alexander urged. "I'll stall them." "They'll kill you," Sarah warned. "Victor wants this handled quietly. Public violence against someone of my profile would raise too many questions." He pressed his car keys into Sarah's hand. "The provincial secretary, Manuel Diaz. Find him. The records we need are in his safekeeping." Sarah hesitated, then pulled her mother toward the kitchen. Through the back window, they watched Alexander, straighten his suit and walk calmly to meet the approaching men. "Alexander Whitley," a tall man with silver hair called out. "Quite a surprise finding you here, Victor." Alexander's voice carried clearly in the still air. "I could say the same." Victor Reynolds approached with the confident stride of a predator, flanked by 4 men whose jackets bulged suspiciously. "When my sources reported your private jet filed a flight plan to San Juan, I was intrigued. When they mentioned you had company, I became concerned." Elena wanted to see her old home, Alexander replied evenly. "A reasonable request after all these years." "Elena." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. And her daughter, too, I presume. The troublesome Ms. Mendoza, who's been collecting information she shouldn't have. Information about legitimate business decisions that need no concealment. Alexander countered. Victor laughed. Always the diplomat, Alex. That's why you have people like me, to handle the messy realities of empire building. He glanced at the house. Where are they? Gone. I sent them to the hotel while I evaluated the structural safety of the building. Always concerned for others. Victor's tone hardened. Let's dispense with the charade. The Mendoza woman has documents that threaten everything we've built. Where is she? Meanwhile, Sarah and Eleanor crept through the overgrown orchard behind the house, making their way toward a neighboring property. The village's closely built houses provided cover as they circled away from Victor's men. The municipal building is just beyond the church, Elena whispered. Manuel was my cousin's husband. If he's still secretary, he'll help us. They reached the small stone church, using its shadow to conceal their movement. The municipal building. Across the square appeared quiet, its faded green door closed against the afternoon heat. As they prepared to cross the open square, the crack of a gunshot froze them in place. It had come from the direction of their house. Alexander, Sarah breathed, instinctively turning back. Elena gripped her arm. We can't help him by getting caught ourselves. The documents are our priority now. Sarah hesitated, torn between their mission and concern for Alexander. Despite years of hatred, the thought of him dying at Victor's hands because of her investigation filled her with unexpected dread. If Victor killed him, we're next, Elena reasoned. Our only protection is exposing the truth. Sarah nodded reluctantly. They waited until the square was momentarily empty, then hurried across to the municipal building, slipping inside just as shouts erupted from the direction of their home. The interior was cool and dim, smelling of old paper and dust. A lone clerk looked up in surprise as they entered. We need to see Manuel Diaz, Elena said in rapid Spanish. It's an emergency. The clerk's eyes widened in recognition. Senora Mendoza? After all these years? Please, Sarah interjected. Lives. Depend on it. The clerk hurried to a back office, returning moments later with an elderly man whose lined face broke into amazement at the sight of Elena. Manuel, Elena began urgently. We need the documents. The ones Miguel left with you before. He died. I've protected those papers for 25 years, Manuel said, leading Elena and Sarah through a narrow corridor to a small office at the back of the building. Miguel knew they would come for him. He made copies of everything. Manuel unlocked an ancient filing cabinet, extracting a sealed manila envelope from its depths. The originals are not here. I placed them in a bank vault in San Juan years ago, but these copies will serve your purpose. Sarah accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Thank you for keeping them safe. I promised Miguel, Manuel replied simply. He peered through the dusty window. Men are searching the village. You cannot stay here. We need to find Alexander, Sarah insisted. Elena touched her arm. Sarah, if that gunshot… We don't know what happened, Sarah countered. And we need him to make this public. His testimony combined with these documents is our best chance. Manuel motioned them toward a rear door. The old wine cellar beneath the church connects to tunnels the resistance used during the military dictatorship. You can move through the village unseen. As they prepared to leave, Manuel added, Elena, there is something else you should know. After you left, Alexander Whitley returned to Villa Esperanza. He came to this office, asking questions about Miguel's death, about the missing evidence. He seemed disturbed by what had happened. Elena's expression remained guarded, yet the development proceeded. Yes, but differently than planned. The more destructive elements were abandoned. He established a small clinic, funded the school renovation. Manuel shrugged. Small compensations for great harm, perhaps, but unusual for such a man. This revelation settled uncomfortably in Sarah's mind as they followed Manuel through the tunnels, musty with decades of disuse. The image of Alexander as purely villainous was becoming frustratingly complex. They emerged inside the church's small sacristy. Through a window, Sarah could see Victor's men methodically searching buildings around the square. We need transportation, she whispered. Father Domingo keeps a truck behind the rectory, Manuel offered. He's conducting services in the mountain. Village today. Take it. I will tell him it was necessary. Elena embraced the old man. Gracias, Manuel, for everything. They slipped out the back of the church to find a battered pickup truck parked in the shade. Sarah used Alexander's keys to break into it, working quickly to hotwire the ignition as her mother kept watch. As the engine sputtered to life, shouts erupted from nearby. One of Victor's men had spotted them. Sarah threw the truck into reverse, narrowly missing the man as he lunged toward them. They bounced over a low stone wall and onto a dirt road leading away from the village. The processing facility, Elena directed. If Alexander is alive, Victor would take him there for questioning. It's isolated. Sarah navigated the rough road while Elena examined the documents from Manuel. These prove everything, she confirmed. Water contamination reports, altered environmental studies, evidence of bribery to local officials. She paused over one document. And this is Miguel's statement about the threats he received before his death. He named Victor specifically. The Whitley Industries facility appeared ahead, a sprawling complex of industrial buildings surrounded by barren land. Once meant to be the showpiece of sustainable development, it now stood as a monument to corporate exploitation, its weathered facade and minimal activity suggesting decline. Sarah parked the truck behind a storage shed, out of sight from the main entrance. How do we get in? Service entrance, Elena replied. I remember from the original plans. This way. They circled the facility cautiously. 2 guards stood at the main entrance, but the service door at the rear was unattended. Inside, the building was eerily quiet, the processing machinery operating at minimal capacity with few workers present. Following the sound of voices, they moved deeper into the facility, eventually reaching a section of administrative offices. Through a partially open door, they heard Victor's distinctive voice. The Takeda deal is too important to jeopardize over ancient history, Alex. Tell me where they went, what they're looking for, and this ends cleanly. Alexander's response was too low to hear. A sharp sound followed, like a slap. 25 years of partnership, Victor continued. And you risk everything for what? Guilt? The daughter you never acknowledged? Sentiment is a luxury we cannot afford. Sarah froze. Elena gripped her arm tightly, eyes wide with unspoken confirmation. Another voice joined the conversation. Sir, our men lost them in the village, but they took a vehicle heading this direction. Find them, Victor ordered. Check every building, every road. They can't have gone far. Footsteps approached the door. Sarah pulled her mother into an adjacent office, ducking behind a desk as the door to their hiding place swung open. A guard glanced inside, then continued down the hallway. We need to create a distraction, Sarah whispered once he'd gone. Something to draw the guards away from Alexander. Elena pointed to the facility's alarm system panel on the wall. That would trigger evacuation protocols. Sarah nodded, moving toward it. Their only chance was to free Alexander and escape with the documents before Victor realized what was happening. As she reached for the alarm, Elena touched her shoulder. Sarah, she said softly. About what Victor said. Later, Mama, Sarah replied firmly. Right now, we need to focus on surviving this. With that, she broke the glass covering the alarm and pulled the lever, releasing a deafening wail throughout the facility. Chaos erupted as the alarm blared through the facility. Workers evacuated following safety protocols, creating a stream of movement toward the exits. Sarah and Elena used the confusion to slip into the office where Alexander was being held. The vet found him slumped in a chair, a bruise darkening his left cheekbone. Victor and the guard had fled, likely assuming the alarm signaled a genuine emergency. Alexander, Sarah called, rushing to untie his hands. He looked up, disorientation giving way to recognition. Sarah, Elena, you need to leave immediately. Victor has called for reinforcements. We have the documents, Sarah told him, helping him to his feet. Miguel's evidence, everything we need to prove what happened. Alexander steadied himself against the desk. Victor admitted to ordering Miguel's death. Said I was always too squeamish to handle necessary sacrifices. Bitterness edged his voice. 25 years of friendship, built on blood I never wanted. Spilled. Save your regrets, Elena said sharply. We need to move. They joined the workers streaming toward the exits, heads down to avoid notice. Outside, emergency vehicles approached, responding to the alarm. Using the growing crowd as cover, they circled back to Father Domingo's truck. We need to get to San Juan, Alexander said as Sarah drove. My pilot is waiting. If we can get to the plane before Victor realizes we've escaped, the documents go public immediately, Sarah insisted. No negotiations. Alexander nodded. Agreed. But we need a secure location first. Victor has resources everywhere. Eleanor, seated between them, had maintained a tense silence. Now she turned to Alexander. In the office, Victor said something about a daughter you never acknowledged. Alexander met her gaze steadily. He did. Is Sarah your daughter? The question hung in the air, the rumble of the truck's engine suddenly deafening in the silence. That followed. I don't know, Alexander answered finally. The timing would align. But you never told me, Elena. You betrayed our community, Elena replied. You used me for information. When I discovered the truth, I wanted nothing from you, not even acknowledgement of my child. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the road, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The possibility had occurred to her during her investigation, but she'd dismissed it as coincidence. Now, hearing it discussed openly made her stomach twist with conflicting emotions. We'll need to verify it, Alexander said quietly. If it's true, it changes nothing, Sarah cut in. Whether I'm Carlos Mendoza's daughter or yours, the facts remain the same. You destroyed Villa Esperanza. Victor killed my uncle on your company's behalf. These are truths that must be addressed regardless of biology. Alexander nodded slowly. You're right. Justice first. Personal matters can wait. They drove in silence until reaching the outskirts of San Juan. Alexander directed Sarah to a small private airfield where his jet waited. The pilot's expression betrayed surprise at their disheveled appearance, but asked no questions as they boarded. New York, Alexander instructed. Direct flight, no stops. Once airborne, they gathered in the plane's small conference area. Alexander connected his laptop to the satellite internet, reviewing the documents Manuel had provided. This is irrefutable evidence, he confirmed. Combined with my testimony about Victor's confession today, it's enough for criminal charges and civil liability. The Takeda deal will collapse, Sarah noted. Yes, Alexander's expression was resigned. 25 years of building an empire, undone by its foundation of lies. What are you planning? Elena asked. Complete transparency. A press conference immediately upon landing. Full disclosure of Whitley Industries' actions in Villa Esperanza. Victor's role in Miguel's death. My own culpability in approving the project despite environmental concerns. He looked up from the documents. I'll announce a significant remediation. Fund for the community and affected families, administered independently. And Victor, Sarah pressed. The evidence goes to federal prosecutors. His confession to ordering Miguel's death, witnessed by me, should be enough for extradition and prosecution. Sarah studied him, searching for deception. Why the sudden conversion? To honesty. You offered me money to keep quiet just days ago. Seeing Villa Esperanza again. Hearing Victor casually discuss murder as a business expense. Alexander sighed heavily. Some reckonings can't be avoided forever. Or perhaps you simply recognized you were cornered, Eleanor suggested. Perhaps, he acknowledged. But motivation matters less than action now. Sarah connected her phone to the plane's Wi-Fi. I'm sending copies of everything to Bennett as insurance. If anything happens to us before the press conference, it all goes public immediately. Alexander nodded. A reasonable precaution. As they prepared their strategy for the coming days, Sarah noticed her mother watching Alexander with an expression that mingled old pain with something more complex. 25 years of buried history was surfacing, and the aftermath would reshape all their lives, regardless of what DNA might eventually prove. Camera flashes erupted as Alexander Whitley approached the podium in the Whitley Industries headquarters' main conference room. The hastily arranged press conference had drawn media from across the financial and mainstream news spectrum, alerted by mysterious promises of a major announcement affecting the pending Takeda deal. Sarah and Elena watched from the side of the stage, their presence generating curious whispers among the assembled journalists. James stood nearby, expression grim as he surveyed the crowd for any sign of Victor's influence. Security had been doubled, with trusted personnel personally vetted by James after their return from Argentina. Alexander adjusted the microphone, his customary confidence tempered by the gravity of the moment. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Today, I must address actions taken by Whitley Industries in Villa Esperanza, Argentina, 25 years ago. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Alexander continued. For decades, I have allowed a narrative of sustainable development and ethical business practices to define my company's public image. That narrative was built on a foundation of deception. Sarah watched reactions cascade through the audience. Financial reporters frantically typing on phones and laptops as Alexander methodically detailed the environmental violations, the coercion of local landowners, and the falsified impact studies that had characterized the Villa Esperanza project. Most grievously, Alexander continued, his voice steady despite the damning admissions, evidence suggests that a community leader who opposed our development, Miguel Fuentes, was deliberately killed to silence opposition. This occurred under the direction of Victor Reynolds, then head of security operations, now a board member of Whitley Industries. Gasps and exclamations erupted. At the mention of Victor's name, James tensed, hand moving subtly toward the weapon Sarah knew he carried. I present these documents, Alexander gestured to displays being distributed to journalists, proving both the environmental malfeasance and the conspiracy surrounding Miguel Fuentes' death. While I did not directly order violence, my approval of the project and willingness to overlook methods used makes me complicit in these actions. The conference room doors burst open. Victor Reynolds strode in, flanked by two men in suits. James immediately moved to intercept them, but Alexander raised a hand to pause him. Victor. Alexander acknowledged calmly. I was just discussing your role in Miguel Fuentes' death. These are baseless accusations, Victor called out, his voice carrying to the assembled media. Alexander Whitley is attempting to scapegoat others for decisions he personally authorized. Alexander's expression remained impassive. The evidence speaks for itself. Your signature appears on orders to permanently neutralize the opposition. Your voice is recorded in a meeting discussing how Miguel's accident should appear convincing. Sarah stepped forward, unable to contain herself any longer. My uncle was murdered on your orders. My family was forced from their home so your company could poison the land for profit. The journalists turned as one, cameras swiveling to capture this unexpected speaker. And who exactly are you? Victor demanded, though his pallor suggested he already knew. Sarah Mendoza, daughter of Elena Mendoza, niece of Miguel Fuentes. She paused, glancing briefly at Alexander before adding, and biological daughter of Alexander Whitley. The room erupted in chaos. This revelation, more than the environmental crimes or even the murder accusation, electrified the media present. Alexander's face revealed momentary shock before he recovered his composure. Is this true? Shouted a journalist, thrusting a recorder toward Alexander. I only recently became aware of the possibility, Alexander replied. DNA testing has confirmed it. This was not strictly true, Sarah knew. The tests had been rushed but remained preliminary. Yet in that moment, watching Alexander publicly acknowledge her, Sarah felt an unexpected weight lift from her shoulders. Victor advanced toward the podium. This is a coordinated attack on my character and reputation. I demand equal time to address these slanderous claims. You'll have plenty of time to address them, James replied, nodding to security personnel who now surrounded Victor. Federal agents are waiting to question you regarding Miguel Fuentes' death. The Justice Department takes murder conspiracies quite seriously, even decades-old ones. As Victor was escorted from the room, protesting loudly, Alexander continued his statement. Effective immediately, I am establishing a $500 million remediation and reparation fund for Villa Esperanza and the families affected. By our actions, this fund will be independently administered, with oversight from community representatives. He paused, looking directly at Sarah and Elena. Additionally, I am resigning as CEO of Whitley Industries, effective immediately. Cameras flashed frantically as Alexander concluded. It is time for new leadership, unencumbered by past wrongs, to guide this company toward true ethical practice, rather than merely the appearance of it. He gestured towards Sarah. I am nominating Sarah Mendoza, whose courage and determination brought these truths to light, to lead the remediation efforts and to take a position on our board of directors, should she accept. The press conference dissolved into a frenzy of questions and camera flashes. Sarah stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sudden public acknowledgement and unexpected offer. Eleanor slipped her hand into her daughter's, a silent anchor amid the storm. Camera. Flashes erupted as Alexander Whitley approached the podium in the Whitley Industries headquarters main conference room. The hastily arranged press conference had drawn media from across the financial and mainstream news spectrum, alerted by mysterious promises of a major announcement affecting the pending Takeda deal. Sarah and Elena watched from the side of the stage, their presence generating curious whispers among the assembled journalists. James stood nearby, expression grim as he surveyed the crowd for any sign of Victor's influence. Security had been doubled, with trusted personnel personally vetted by James after their return from Argentina. Alexander adjusted the microphone, his customary confidence tempered by the gravity of the moment. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Today, I must address actions taken by Whitley Industries in Villa Esperanza, Argentina, 25 years ago." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Alexander continued. "For decades, I have allowed a narrative of sustainable development and ethical business practices to define my company's public image. That narrative was built on a foundation of deception." Sarah watched reactions cascade through the audience, financial reporters frantically typing on phones and laptops as Alexander methodically detailed the environmental violations, the coercion of local landowners, and the falsified impact studies that had characterized the Villa Esperanza project. "Most grievously," Alexander continued, his voice steady despite the damning admissions, "evidence suggests that a community leader who opposed our development, Miguel Fuentes, was deliberately killed to silence opposition. This occurred under the direction of Victor Reynolds, then head of security operations, now a board member of Whitley Industries." Gasps and exclamations erupted. At the mention of Victor's name, James tensed, hand moving subtly toward the weapon Sarah knew he carried. "I present these documents." Alexander gestured to displays being distributed to journalists, proving both the environmental malfeasance and the conspiracy surrounding Miguel Fuentes' death. "While I did not directly order violence, my approval camera." Flashes erupted as Alexander Whitley approached the podium in the Whitley Industries headquarters main conference room. The hastily arranged press conference had drawn media from across the financial and mainstream news spectrum, alerted by mysterious promises of a major announcement affecting the pending Takeda deal. Sarah and Elena watched from the side of the stage, their presence generating curious whispers among the assembled journalists. James stood nearby, expression grim as he surveyed the crowd for any sign of Victor's influence. Security had been doubled, with trusted personnel personally vetted by James after their return from Argentina. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the reception desk of the Regal Windsor Hotel, no longer in uniform, but dressed in a tailored business suit. The hotel had been her starting point, her carefully chosen vantage point to observe Alexander Whitley. Now she returned as an honored guest for the Whitley Foundation's annual gala. "Ms. Mendoza," the receptionist greeted her warmly. "Your guests have already arrived in the ballroom." "Thank you," Sarah replied, accepting her keycard. She paused, remembering how Alexander had mocked her accent at this very desk less than a year ago. The memory no longer carried its bitter sting, not forgiveness precisely, but a transformation of pain into purpose. The grand ballroom had been transformed for the evening's event, the first major fundraiser for the Villa Esperanza restoration project. Corporate leaders, environmental activists, and media figures mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, drawn by the scandal that had rocked the business world and by the unprecedented corporate accountability that had followed. Elena waited near the entrance, elegant in a deep blue gown, speaking with several Argentine government officials who had flown in for the event. Since the revelations, Elena had become an unexpected public figure, her dignity and resilience in the face of decades of injustice earning widespread admiration. "There you are," Elena said, embracing her daughter. "Alexander was asking for you." "Something about the presentation," Sarah nodded. "I'll find him." She moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and questions about the restoration project with practiced ease. The past months had thrust her into a public role she had never anticipated, transforming her from anonymous hotel employee to the face of corporate accountability. Alexander stood near the stage, reviewing notes with Victoria, his acknowledged daughter. The two women had formed a cautious alliance, united by their determination to reform Whitley Industries from within. "Sarah," Alexander greeted her. "Victoria has some concerns about the scope of the medical facility proposal." "Not concerns," Victoria clarified. "Questions about implementation timeline. The soil remediation needs to be completed first. Sarah nodded. I agree. That's reflected in the updated proposal. As they discussed project details, Sarah observed the changes in Alexander. The imperious billionaire remained, but tempered now by humility and a genuine commitment to restitution. Their relationship remained complex. The DNA confirmation of paternity, creating a connection neither had sought, but both now navigated with careful respect. Victor Reynolds's trial was scheduled for the following month. His initial bravado had crumbled when faced with the evidence from Villa Esperanza and testimony from former security personnel who had carried out his orders. Several Whitley Industries board members implicated in the cover-up had resigned, allowing for a restructuring that prioritized ethical governance. The lights dimmed, signaling the start of the formal program. Sarah took her place at the podium, surveying the assembled guests. Welcome to the inaugural fundraiser for the Villa Esperanza restoration project, she began, her accent now a point of pride rather than concealment. 1 year ago, I stood behind a reception desk in this very hotel, watching Alexander Whitley arrive with no idea who I really was. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the audience. Today, we announce the official beginning of work to restore the environmental damage done to Villa Esperanza, to provide medical care for those suffering long-term health effects from contamination, and to create sustainable economic opportunities for the community. She outlined the project's scope: water purification systems, medical facilities, educational scholarships, and economic development initiatives. The foundation had already secured commitments totaling over $700 million, an unprecedented response. This is not charity, Sarah emphasized. This is accountability. This is the beginning of a new model of corporate responsibility, where past wrongs are acknowledged and addressed directly by those responsible. Alexander joined her at the podium for the formal announcement of the first phase of implementation. Their joint appearance, father and daughter, united in purpose, if not yet in emotional connection, created a powerful image of reconciliation and renewal. Later, as the evening wound down, Sarah found herself alone with Elena on the hotel's terrace, looking out over the New York skyline. Are you happy with this path? Elena asked gently, working alongside him, bearing his name. Sarah considered the question. I'm at peace with it. The work matters more than my feelings about him. She touched the silver locket she still wore. I do this for Miguel, for you, for the community we lost. Elena nodded. Your father would be proud. Carlos raised you to seek justice, not vengeance. And you? Sarah asked. How do you feel seeing Alexander every day, working with him on the foundation? Time changes perspective, Eleanor replied carefully. Not erasing the past, but allowing space for something new to grow alongside old pain. She touched her daughter's cheek. You have his determination and my stubborn principles. A formidable combination. Inside, the gala continued. Tomorrow would bring meetings, plans, the detailed work of restitution. But for this moment, mother and daughter stood together, looking toward a future neither could have imagined when their journey began. At the reception desk below, new guests arrived, greeted by staff who had no knowledge of the drama that had unfolded in their hotel. Sarah watched them, remembering her own time behind that desk, how a moment of casual cruelty had triggered a cascade of revelations that transformed many lives. We should rejoin the others, she said, finally. As they turned to go inside, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the glass doors, her features now recognizable as a blend of Eleanor's warmth and Alexander's intensity. Not just a Mendoza seeking justice, not merely a Whitley claiming her inheritance, but something new entirely, forged in the crucible of truth, finally spoken aloud. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories of hidden identities and unexpected confrontations. Comment below with what you enjoyed most and share what themes you'd like us to explore in future stories. We create narratives based on your requests.